Good evening. Welcome to Athens City Council. Tonight is Monday, May 9th, 2011. It's on or about 7 p.m. This evening, City Council is meeting in a series of five committee meetings, starting with Planning and Development. Committee Chair, Chris Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to, the agenda looks a little confusing. It's, I think, a little misleading. Basically, what's happening at the former Columbia Gas process, are you done?
No, we're making fun.
Property is that they would like to be annexed. So this is the start of annexation process by the owners of the property. And of course, with this being Athens, we never have straightforward, simple annexation processes. But what they wanted to do was work with the township, because when the annexation of a piece of property happens in the city, the township does lose some property taxes. And so the owners of the piece of property have been working with the Canaan Township trustees to try to mitigate this over the years, over several years, in realizing the annexation process can be an impact and a burden on the township trustees. I provide a letter from their attorney, and basically this is it's a somewhat new process that the ORC provides for annexation. And Pat Lang and I went over it. This is the first time that he's seen it, and this is the first time it's been happening in Athens. And basically what it does is it gives the township trustees property tax over a number of years. And that number of years, it slowly reduces the amount of tax that's being given for the piece of property. And so and it's all set out in this letter. Basically, the first 3 years they'd be getting full property tax, which is approximately $5,000. And then, years 4 through 6, it reduces, and then it goes over approximately a 10 to 12 year period. And so, at the same time, if the property starts developing, Athens itself would start getting its taxes paid by the development. So this is an agreement that's between the property owners and the township trustees before annexation goes and proceeds. It will go through the normal annexation process that we have to go with. My one concern was, on annexation, when property gets annexed, usually the city of Athens would be starting to get money from the property, and since it's reduced because it's actually going until development starts going to the township trustees, I was concerned about police and fire costs. So we agreed to that if there was some kind of police run or fire run to the property, say for a brush fire or something, seeing how this is an undeveloped piece of property, that the owners of the piece of property would reimburse the city of Athens $1,000 for a police run and $2,000 for a fire run. So that's helped to protect the city's assets for this piece of property, because this is a somewhat other unusual annexation. So the process has to go in front of the Planning Commission and through us, and so I just wanted to give you a heads up on what they have been working with the township trustees. Questions?
There are other questions besides mine? Okay, I think the planner had mentioned that the Ohio Revised Code actually talked about 10 years versus 13, so this would be like 3 years off the clock. Is that what I'm seeing?
I think what they want to do is start the, there's also a kick-in period for when the development starts. I think the ORC looks at when development, there's a difference between annexation versus start of development.
Okay, and the baseline would be the taxes given to the township would be the unimproved land or unimproved land plus?
Well, that was a question that the planner and I were looking at, and we're waiting for the lawyer to get back. I think that it's the start is for the unimproved land, and the thought is that it will take a while for it to get developed and such. But at the same time, piece of property, after the first 3 years, the amount of money that goes down also. It goes, and there's a percentage of what the taxes are going to be paid on it. So maybe what I need from Mr. Baker is a table, a more precise table that he could develop for exactly what they see. Would that be helpful?
Probably so.
Okay. I will ask him that.
Questions?
I just, based on Mr. Baker's letter, I just want to state that it states that once the statutory compensation begins, the City of Athens would be solely responsible for the cost of fire and police rents that include the annexed property, unless, of course, it's a false alarm.
Oh, well, I mean, that's according to our statutes. But, I mean, once it's fully annexed in, I mean, that would...
But we can provide those comparisons. We'll go right back to that.
Okay, so what you're talking about is for the first 3 years, it's $5,000, which is the approximate value of the estate tax, real estate tax. And then after that would be 80% for years 1 to 3.
For years 4 and 5, it's 67.5%,
and a half percent, and
it's going down approximately a third.
okay. So the implication here is it doesn't really include any improvements that would occur on the
Right.
property.
Right.
So they'd be getting a declining amount of $5,000 over a 10-year period after the first 3 years. Okay.
So well, the idea is to kind of help them wean them off the property tax.
Okay, and the push to do this is because we want it annexed in and developed.
They would like to be annexed. They can't. They feel that they can have little to no possibilities of development without annexation. So,
We would like it annexed.
yes, it's the little bubble that we're waiting for.
Okay.
So, you know, I mean, on one level, the Ohio Revised Code, from my understanding with talking with the law director, is that the townships can't keep a piece of property from being annexed. So this seems like a very community-spirited way of them dealing with the township trustees. So,
I was going to ask 2 questions. Federal Hawking will still get its share of the school tax, or are we only talking about the amount that goes to the
the
township?
trustees.
Okay,
So,
that's a good deal for them. Okay.
I didn't think this was Federal Hawking. I thought it was still Athens City Schools, no?
I always thought it was Federal.
Okay. I don't know.
this is between the trustees and the owners.
So we go to whichever school
So we're
districts.
limited to that. They have to pay the school tax, whichever one it is.
Yes.
Right.
The utilities would require a surcharge, and also a surcharge on the tap fee unless they're in. So
Right.
that's their incentive, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this, you know,
20%.
this agreement does not guarantee, you know, that the annexation process, you know, if as council we find problems with it. I mean, this is just between the attorney, the owners and the township trustees. We will still do, you know, look at provision of services and all the other annexation process that we normally go through, and the county commissioners will go through.
I think you said that if development begins, Canaan still gets their $5,000 or whatever portion they're getting, but the city of Athens gets any proceeds from development that happens.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
So-
And then back up, as the percentage of Canaan Township part of that $5,000 is going away, does the other part of it go to Athens, or do the taxes?
When it's annexed, yeah. So it's the,
But in that 10, 13-year period, we're not getting any
no, we would be
taxes.
getting the, From my understanding, it's, if they're getting 95% or 67%, then we would be getting
We get that other- okay.
Right, so it's a gradual, instead of doing a year one where they get nothing and we get everything, it would be a gradual transfer.
And for 3 years, they get the full amount.
So it's like years, they chunked it up into 3 to,
Yeah, okay, I understand. Thank you.
This is kind of, this is new, this is different than what we've done before, but I'm viewing it like the TIF, where the baseline was always going to the county. In terms of the West State Street, East State Street TIF, the baseline of the unapproved property for Walmart, Lowe's, and everything like that is going to the county, and the additional is going to us, which of course it gets passed through to the school system. And it would be happening, the same thing would be happening. If I understand correctly, the 5,000, which is the assessed value of the property right now in terms of the tax burden, that most of that would be still going to school, the remainder would be going to the township, and over time the ratio would change, still going, same amount going to the school, but we'd be in charge of different portions of it as the years go by. And then, of course, any improvements on the property would increase the value, and therefore that would be in our bailiwick, so to speak.
from my understanding with discussions. So,
And at this point, they haven't really petitioned the county yet.
no.
It hasn't even started.
Right.
technically.
I wanted, because it's an unusual process, and they have been negotiating with the township trustees, I wanted to give a heads up. And I had Pat, the law director, Lang, look it over and such, and he will report back on it.
When you look at the map back there, the white portion that's still sticking out amongst all the purple really tells the story about how it's almost an unannexed balloon on a string kind of thing. Right.
Yep. So, and at one point I can have Mr. Baker come in and discuss this further if there's more questions,
Okay.
lawyerly sort of questions. So that's just basically a courtesy heads up for everybody.
Okay.
So,
Any other questions?
so we're paying the school, or they're paying the school. Somebody's paying the school district.
I think that needs to be
It's 5,000.
written
Okay.
out in the agreement of the annexation.
They'd be paying the school, at least for they'd be paying the school
Separately.
separate, yeah. It's
Okay.
no, it's what they're doing now for the first 3 years, and then a
I just want to make
percentage,
sure. It seemed a little,
if I'm reading it correctly.
well,
Okay.
Well, I think that's a good question, and whether it needs to be put in the letter to the township trustees, I could ask Mr. Baker. So,
yes, Mr. Lang.
okay.
Okay.
I have no more.
No, you don't have any miscellaneous?
No, miscellaneous.
Well, just to bring you up to speed, the Planning Commission is talking about having an evening Planning Commission meeting?
We are having an evening planning commission
Okay. The 18th?
to discuss sign regulations from the ad hoc committee that was put forth. And that will be here,
7
7
o'clock?
o'clock.
Yes.
Is that strictly just for signs, or is it a general meeting?
It will also
that
be our
will-
general meeting.
But I think that will be the only thing on the agenda, I
Agenda.
think, isn't it? I don't know.
There's
We
still
haven't really
time.
made up the agenda, but we know that has to be on it.
Okay.
And we figured that we'd have, we thought we'd get enough information at that point to keep it going for quite some time.
And that's 7?
7 p.m. here.
Ready? On to City Services Committee Chair Nancy Bain.
All right. You have in your packet a material ordinance that would amend the public utilities chapter of our code to add stormwater regulations. More than a year ago, the
did bring this
Ohio
one that you
EPA
gave
came
me.
to us asking us to, it's a big one, and asked us to start this
The only thing
process.
she gave me was this.
And so after that time, Paul Logue, the planner, and Ron Lucas, probably, I think, and Andy Stone all worked together to make sure there were no incompatibilities, especially
why I
with
don't wanna do this.
respect to the,
There's actually a mute button.
especially with respect to the hillside ordinance. And so they ironed all of those out. I believe there's only one inconsistency, and that is one of the books that is in our hillside ordinance is not the same one as in this one, and they're going to have that worked out by the time it goes up for first reading. Anybody who wants to can read it, and the next time we meet, we can talk about it one more time if you have any questions. It's fundamentally moving to a new utility, a stormwater utility, and very common in larger cities, and we've been able to, dare I say, avoid this until recently, but now it's certainly on our agenda, something that we need to start doing. We've tried to, a couple of times I had students work on it as on the prospect in an internship, but we have a relatively complicated city, as you all know, and so now we're at the edge and we have to go forward. So in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, we'll look at it one more time and like to have it passed before we recess for July. I looked it over. There's a lot of material in here. It's basically trying to clean up the stormwater part of our utility. So there's a time possibility on that one. Second thing, though, yeah.
That's the draft from... Looking at a draft from the 4th of this month. Is that the one you're looking
Yeah.
at? Okay.
They all have copies.
Okay.
Yeah, Andy was a busy guy.
I just want to make sure we're on the same
Yep,
version.
it's
what
old
we did,
blank
exactly.
11. They all have copies. I don't know. I
Okay.
thought you guys had it too. Okay, so read and enjoy. Second thing, 2 more things that come with this, and these are money things. One of them is that we would, and if you refer to that handout about stormwater tap fees, when we passed our tap fee ordinance in PA, the decision came our way, incidentally. When we passed our storm fee ordinance in November, December, we said we were going to withhold storm tap fee. I think we put in a nice round number with some zeros on it for a tap fee for stormwater management. Well, now we have one that was borrowed, and we'll probably take a look around and see who else has one. I was looking at Cincinnati and Worcester and a few others, and they're all in this vicinity. So all new development will have assessed against them, in addition to the tap-in fee for the sewer and the water, 10 cents per 2,000 square feet of increase in impermeable surface. And so you can see that the tap fee for a single-family home would be $2,500. And that would be much less than either the water or sewer. And a larger facility, let's say one that has multiple thousands of parking lots, would have a considerably higher tap-in fee. The example that we have of 700,000 roughly square foot parking lot would have a 70,000 square foot, 70,000 roughly tap-in fee. In other words, the impact of the impervious surface, that would be the roof of the garage and the blacktop surface, will be the basis for the assessment of this particular fee. And so if there's no problem, this will be a savings for many of the developments. I'd like to start that forward with a modification of the tap fee after you pass it by the law director. Okay, anybody have any questions on that? We've been working on this for, yes.
Thanks. One question. Is this similar information to what Member Paul had been working on as well, too, with development and trying to think the details on that?
Total lot coverage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they kind of we're working together. And
That's going to be in the next thing.
Okay.
I think, yeah, the 2,500, if you think about how much of a footprint your house has, and this is going to be a general, somewhere in the vicinity of 2,500 square feet will be the base charge. But right now, the tap-in fee is to move in the direction of solving storm water issues in the city. And heaven knows, several of us have direct experience with those. Okay.
Nancy?
Yeah.
This is for all new development?
The tap-in fee is, I'm going
Yes.
to the other one in a second.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? Jim?
Is that what you were just talking about, is that in here?
No, it's on this one, that sheet. I was killing trees, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's the lower one.
I was wearing this out, flipping through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's complicated.
it's tap-in is muscle.
Okay, so this is the second piece of paper we've been looking at, and the third thing is by the 1st of July, I'd like to have in place for the 1st of September a stormwater fee. We talked about this thing. I would hate to tell you how many hours I worked with students who were measuring the impervious surface and all the rest of the issues surrounding this, the same thing that we were talking about before. And the issue is that we have some database questions. And so in an effort to start an income stream and move in the direction of getting rid of inflow and infiltration, so that our wastewater plant isn't so under so much demand, getting rid of places where water has been a problem. And I would point out that many of us, myself especially, live in areas, I'll use my example, I'm sure there are other people here, but if you live on Blackburn Hill or, let's see, From Road or Morrison Brown Hill or Canterbury, not Canterbury, but what's the name of the one that goes up the hill that we had?
Mulligan?
Mulligan, thank you. I'm doing a geography in my head, trying to figure out all those places that were annexed in as part of Columbus Road. None of those have storm sewers per se. What they have is often grassy verges or trenches along the side, and so over the long haul, that will be something we will be working with. But we are going to be moving in the direction of starting to solve the stormwater problems that are out there, including testing, as is required by the new improved Clean Water Act, and also solving other problems that are out there. Now, to this end, we have GIS, and I think it probably could be done very nicely in a GIS environment, and the emphasis there is on could. And the question is, does anyone have time right now to work with half a square foot and so on? What we really have is a stormwater situation in which almost everybody, especially on the small lots, is going to be in the vicinity of 2,500 square feet. So rather than spend another 2 years, because I've spent years before doing this, we stopped this first time because the biggest stormwater generator in town would have been, if I paid $1 a month, would have had to pay $100,000 a month. And politically, the previous administration just wasn't interested in doing that. So having said that, we're taking a little bit of a different tack here. And so this is a proposal, a flat monthly rate, creating a stormwater utility within the sewer bill. And all the residents in the city will be paying $2. Notice it's not on a separate charge. It will be rolled into the sewer charge, almost because I was at Kroger over Christmas, and people kept talking to me about the extra charges that they hate so much. So even though I said they're going off, one of them at least next year, they just don't want to hear it. So there will be, for residential users, so-called, there will be a $2 increase per month if this goes through. Commercial users, $4, and industrial users, of which there are 10, $4. And this is the start, and as they work on the database problems and try to pull those issues together, you will start to see some changes in rates. I don't imagine there will be very many in the residential areas, but there might be some in the taps that are commercial and industrial. Do you understand the concept? Yeah, okay. And it's a relatively modest chart, but it will produce enough income to take care of some of the large stormwater problems on the south side in Mulligan Road, for example, and may perhaps reduce the amount of expansion needed in the sewer fund. I talked to Ray about this, and it'll just go, the sewer bill will go in, they'll take off $2 or $4 per month, put it in a separate fund, and they'll be, that's the concept. Problems? I don't know. I didn't know if Andy had time. Yeah.
Will it help fix our problems with Richland Avenue?
Potentially, yeah. You would have, I think one of the things that he has been talking about is lining the existing clay pipes, and that will reduce the amount of inflow and infiltration. And not only there, but also in the vicinity of Cable Lane. And that will be very pricey, but it's better than going in and imagine just driving a liner right into them as opposed to digging up people's yards and all the rest. So that's basically what has been done in Ironton. It worked pretty well, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Nancy. And Member Bean, I was just going to add, I had a similar conversation when I was campaigning, similar to what you had, I think, at Kroger, in which there was discussion about our utility bills, and that being fairly steep for people that are maybe single-family, single-person resident, and so adding more money to that bill, I think, is a concern to some people, but if they know what they're getting out of it, I think that might be helpful or beneficial. I do appreciate you explaining that.
Problem. Yeah.
Again, this is part of the stormwater issue we have. Basically, stormwater maintenance falls into the streets or sewer, and it's always been an orphan fund. So anything that can get us rolling on a plan, which is required, and then implementing the plan is a pretty good thing. I mean,
They could probably, I think they have a pretty good idea of what they do for a plan, but they being Jessica and Andy and Paul Oak and the rest.
but it still means building out an infrastructure at places that aren't.
No, I wasn't disagreeing with you. I
Yeah.
was just suggesting that would be the thing that will come up. Any other questions?
I do have another comment when we get to miscellaneous. But,
Okay, well, miscellaneous is going to be a little bit longer than I anticipated. All right, that'll be up for first reading then, if you have no problems with it. Okay. After our last meeting, I asked Andy to consider a cheaper alternative to the wastewater treatment plant, and so, once again, something for you to look at between now and the another month. 12 million seems like a lot of money. Does to me, anyway. 12 million. Then I was cleaning out a file, and I realized that in the last wastewater plant upgrade, the one that was required in order to meet the requirements of the Clean Water Act, our initial improvement was 5 million, and we had to borrow that money. But we actually paid for the engineering out of operating funds, and so it was 5.5 million. And then we had to borrow again because they fumbled the design. It was the famous vacuum-assisted sludge drying bed, best available technology, but it wasn't so hot. It was not very good. So we had to take that out. Then we caked the sludge for a while. That didn't work either. We sold that baby at some reduced cost. And then finally we got our existing system, which, not surprisingly, for the cost, the engineer said works really well. So now we're back to the wet side, as he said earlier. And then we added another $1 million for relief sewers and another $1 million. And so in order to meet the requirements of the Clean Water Act, 1988, we probably spent close to $10 million, and we're just about paid off on those. So that's to put it in context. It may seem like a heck of a lot of money, because it is a heck of a lot of money, but in 1983 dollars, 84, 85, 86 dollars, it was a lot of money then, too. And we're going to have the money that we're paying currently into the fund to be used for this. But so I said to him, well, Andy, let's try this. Why don't you remember how we looked at that map of the site? Yep. We have those little square. This is this one right here, and we have those little square deals that we call they're primary clarifiers and secondary clarifiers. And you have to have 2 of each of those, but they really often only use 1. So I said, what would happen if we put in a new clarifier 1 as opposed to 2? And that was the scenario, and 1 secondary clarifier as opposed to 2, to see how much money we could save. And, in order to bring the price down a little bit. And I did that because there was already some kind of, oh my goodness, that's so much money going on. So he came back, being the kind of guy he is, he came back with a report very quickly, and the engineer firm also did some calcs on it, and they're all included here. It looks kind of skinny. Oh, good, it's back to back. One of the things that he saw as a drawback to this, in other words, using the new clarifiers mostly, but once in a while using the old square ones. And the old square ones were a problem because the gunk, which is the nicest way to say it, gets stuck in those corners. Looks really nice from up above, but actually if most cities have circular clarifiers for the very reason that you wouldn't want those corners for the soon-to-be sludge to get caught in. And, I wouldn't want to be down there moving it out myself. I always think about that as not a job I would like. Anyway, so that's why they're circular, and if you travel on airplanes, you know every time you go into town, that's exactly how you know you're over the wastewater treatment plant. Okay, so he said the drawbacks: trap accumulates scum, creates odors during low flows, even though we would probably only be using one at a time. Our secondary clarifiers don't perform as well as they could, as a new one would be. That's another drawback. And I just told him to be a good doobie and do this so we could look at it. And then the next page, Strand took the picture, and there's the walls. Now, initially, we were just going to fix those walls up. Now, what do you think on a scale of 1 to 10, fixing up those walls is going to do? 1 being low, 10 being good. I don't think it's going to, it looks like they're going to have to do an awful lot of work on that. Handrails. We've been painting handrails as long as I've been on council, so need I say more? But
And we've replaced them.
and we replaced them too. Okay, so Strand came back with the proposal, and he said, in order to do the basic project, the engineering would probably be somewhere in the vicinity of $700,000, because it's usually about 10%, and then it would be about $6 million. And that would be to put in new screening, which recently the EPA said we have to do, grit removal, using ultraviolet instead of chlorine, and some other upgrades there. And so you can see they go up a bit with that. And then with our new alternative, you can see we'd save $2 million. And maybe not get rid of the stink, which worries me a lot. So you'd have those big square old outmoded clarifiers sitting there. I actually wonder about the design component too. It's way off, so you'd have to pump the stuff over, use it, and then bring it back. I don't know that I like it all that much. But, I'm not going to be operating it, so I'm not it's not an aesthetical thing. I just wonder. Simple is always better. And the one thing that we can say is this new approach is standard. This will be in place unless something dramatic happens. It will be in place because it's this way everyone else does it. They don't have square clarifiers. They have circular ones. There's no equivalent to the vacuum-assisted sludge drying bed in this proposal. So we won't be spending millions of dollars on messes. And then, so we're somewhere in the vicinity of saving $2 million with that. So go look at the summary, and we can discuss it in a month. But the positive, primary sludge pit and pump station number 2 can be removed. That's a good thing with the F1 summary, because we really don't have a bunch of choice with that. We have to get rid of it. The primary sludge pit is you end up with a confined space type of working environment, not something, because of the square rectilinear approach there. Slight savings over alternative 1E. We'd have a simplified primary clarifier construction sequencing, and it would meet all the future flow requirements, that is, leaving the old ones and then putting in a new one right next to it. The drawbacks: scum trap and odors remain. The secondary clarifiers that we have don't perform all that well. They're old. And the primary walls, you'd have to raise the primary walls in order to do it, so you're going to have to build up on that. Very weak concrete, additional yard piping, add handrail to existing tanks, a more complex plant operating to save $2 million, limits hydraulic flexibility. The secondaries, this little shorthand there on that is that they would be occupying a space that they might use should we have to go to tertiary treatment, which seems almost certain. We used to take phosphorus out. We'll probably have phosphates out. We'll have to do it again maybe in the not too distant future. My dream would be a wetland. I might be the only one that has that dream. That would also be hard to operate, I imagine. It would be downstream. Okay, so you want to look at this and think about it, and pray over it? I don't know what. We may be at that point. We're talking somewhere between 10 and 12 million. And in a while, then, after we have another discussion on this, after you talk today, we'll ask the auditor to check into some places like OWDA, stormwater, see what happens. Maybe 30 years. The engineers seem to be pretty confident, who did the study, that we would be in fairly decent shape with 3% increases. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to start on that end. Chris, you were there.
Thank you. If you could, yes, I was there for the initial presentation by Strand, and this is interesting to see the potential cost savings, although, if it doesn't get rid of the smell, then, where are we? And if we don't have the, a second clarifier. Could you walk us through which numbers on this spreadsheet, the summary of costs in million? You're saying rather than 11.01, is that correct? For alternative 1E, we'd be at 1.98 potentially, or I wasn't sure.
I think it depends, and I'm a little bit vague on this as well. It'd be somewhere in the vicinity of 1 and 2 million, because right now it's 12 million, but that includes engineering. I'm
Okay.
assuming this includes engineering also. It's
Okay.
about $1 million worth of engineering. So we're really only probably saving $1 million in that 1E. And, then I looked down and I said, 1098, maybe it's, well, that's not going to be any 2 million either. I exaggerated, I think.
That's right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
And my only other comment is that if these are upgrades that could potentially put our functioning system in good shape for,
Yeah, they said the
30
secondary
years, then the cost spread out over that period of time doesn't
We can
seem...
go 30 years, that's
That's
the big
great.
question. Yeah.
And how many times have you and I seen upgrades, 30 years?
That's all.
Yeah, but this one is certainly,
This is a major.
yeah, this is way major.
But when would you
No,
expect
I
it?
was just debating the wisdom of trying to save $2 million and
Or $1
risking
million.
not getting rid of the smell and not
it's not
equipping
saving.
us for as long as we can. If it's 30 years, if it's 22.5 years, whatever. I think Chris is right. Are we actually saving that money or just putting it off?
Well, he did what I asked him.
I know.
I'm grateful for
But
that.
he didn't really come back.
Same.
Hopefully, you were probably thinking
No, I was.
I was.
half of that.
I was
was.
not.
Absolutely was. I mean, really, we may have to look at this in phases. I understand they keep talking about mobilization and what have you, but the auditor is looking at what the debt capacity can be. So there's more conversation to be had.
Okay.
Well, and he identified on that spreadsheet at least 2 places where there was a problem. There were 3 years where we'd be collecting and not drawing down. So that was one of them. And then the second thing he identified, which I had also identified, but it didn't, in my own mind I had at least. I can say that, but I didn't say it. He has about $300,000 for projects. Now, one thing that you would do, and I won't be doing it, but you guys can do it. I think every 3 years you should evaluate and see, is it adequate? Is the money adequate to cover this? That would be the thing. Questions? Sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Member Bain. And thank you to Andy Stone as well for his work on this. But my concern is I was going to echo the exact same sentiments that came from that side of the room, in which when we consider quality of life issues, do we really want to save some money but still have a smell? So that would be my concerns as well.
Well, I'll probably, with your permission, ask the auditor if we can, or ask them to calculate the 30-year period as opposed to a 20-year period. Having the past experience from 88 to 2014, I can tell you that we have altered we went back and assessed and altered the amounts at various times. For example, Oakmont Station, the whole south side overbuilt infrastructure, we had to do something there. Maybe it was a little extreme, but we had to, we did that out of operating funds. The last, 2 decades, there were times when we didn't do much at all in terms of new sewage improvements. But, I think that if we want $12 million, the $12 million plant, then we ask. At least that's the way we used to do it. You say, this is what we want. We want to borrow $12 million and take care of this. And that's the way you would do it. We have already the EPA on our case with $6 million. So, at least that's the way it was before. Yes, sir.
So the alternative 1F is really not saving that money. If I'm looking at the bottom line here, we're talking about for the 8.1 million gallons per day, 11.01 for 1E, which I think is what we were talking about before. And it will go down to 10.98, so we're saving less than $1 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with that alternative, you have to still do some of the things that we would avoid doing, and that's where the costs come from, because we'd have to build up those, that degraded,
And we have no indication when the tertiary treatment might come into effect.
we
Okay.
have no idea. But it'll probably take it'll, just like stormwater, it took 10 years, right, before they finally got down.
I think it was longer. I remember you having those interns there.
Those interns are now middle-aged, for goodness sakes.
It was a long
Of
time.
their own.
They have interns of their own, yes. And so, I don't know that we're asking for a decision right now, but I will proceed with the questions about the 30 years. Ohio Water Development Authority. With some of the, you don't have to borrow it all and start paying down on it. You draw it down, which is the best way to do it, as opposed to going to mortgage revenue bonds. Okay. I'm done, unless there's miscellaneous.
Miscellaneous. Yeah,
Miscellaneous?
thank you. I just wanted to inform council that we did receive some information regarding citizen John Spotforth's concerns about water runoff and his hillside. John is here this evening, and he and I have had a couple conversations about this, very amicable, and he's expressed his concerns very clearly and maturely, acknowledging that over the years there's been runoff from Miller up above his property down to behind his property where he lives and resides on Brown. We did meet along with Ron Lucas and City Service, as well as Andy Stone, the Public Works Director, and Member Gosney and I, to just take a look at this and get Mr. Spotforth's take on the concerns. So I wanted the council to be aware that this information that he's collected and gathered over the years is in our hands, and that he may take a minute to address this as well this evening, just expressing concerns or frustrations he has. And this might be beneficial. Like, I don't know if the law director's not here tonight, and he might be able to help clarify a few things, but I think there's a question of the city right-of-way and issues up there, whether, I guess, because there have been efforts to fix the runoff in years past. So I just wanted the council to be aware of this.
Yeah, just a couple of things. The right-of-way right behind the southern line of my property was in 1984. That was Miller Street itself, because that was in our meeting last year. I pointed out the still extant ends of what was about an 8-foot high retaining wall all along my property and that of my adjacent properties. When the water runoff started, it came over with a huge water spout. And over the years, well, so I won't go into the history of it. So that's still going on now, 27 and a half years later. I'd like to just close and say there's been 3 people in council in all these years who have helped me. Most notably Nancy Bain. In 1986, she and I walked up and down Miller, if you remember. And,
I remember.
And you knew where the water was coming from. Well, so she pushed through Ordinance 04186. Now, had that been implemented as written by Ed Beckett, it would have stopped it, but it wasn't implemented and the water kept falling over. Oops, I'm sorry, and has ever since. The second person, of course, is Kent, who's been very helpful over this past, I don't know what, 3.5 couple of years, and they finally rounded up Ron Lucas and Andy Stone, and with Elihu, the 4 of us went up there last summer, and I explained all about it. And lastly, in the early 90s, when Linda Hiller was on First Ward, she helped me too by filing a complaint with the city then, but the city, once again, it did nothing. So none of the mayors, the four mayors, Ed Beckett, Sarah Hendiker, Rick Cable, and now Paul Weil, and have helped me. In fact, when Paul, just one last thing, when Paul was campaigning for his current position, I asked him and his challenger, Republican Ed Baum, at different times to come by. Paul came by, and I walked up on the hillside there, or the landslide, and I said, what can be done to fix this? And he just scowled and frowned and says nothing, and turned and left. So Ed Baum came over, and I guess maybe Republicans like property rights more than Democrats, I don't know, but he immediately said, oh, we'll get a CDBG grant, and he made a couple other suggestions. So that's why I voted for Ed, and that's when I became an independent. So I'm hoping, well, I'm not just hoping, I guess I'm demanding that this water runoff to be stopped, the soilage returned, oh, and how to fund it, that thing is in that paper. Probably will take about $1 million now, when it would have taken under $4,084. So the city can simply raise the income tax, say a couple of points for 1 year to raise that, as they're raising money for paving our streets. Thank you, Council. All right, thanks.
Thanks. Can I offer one other information, or?
Answering the committee. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. I did, one of the things that I did do after a recent conversation with Mr. Spotforth was I contacted Andy Stone, and he wanted to look at the street during a rainstorm. So he did, and in his opinion, his opinion at the time was that there was adequate drainage for the Miller Street, and I did inform you of that conversation I had with him.
Yeah, but the street that you're talking about is the new Miller Street that was made in a CDBG project in 1989. But the original one is that which is now flattened out. And that was, and I think Nancy Bain may, I remember seeing it, but it was 10 feet wide and was gravelled, fully intact. And the water runoff and what pushed all of that down. So what's there now is the second Miller Street, but six property owners have been damaged by this since about 1983. 3 of them have lost their front yards due to eminent domain, rather than to rebuild the original Miller Street, which should have happened. They went back in about 10 feet and took their in the front yards and put a street in there. So that's where that curve comes in the curbing. So the original Miller Street now is part of that landslide, and water has been coming from that, with the city property, for all these years. So that's where the city is liable. And there's been so much negligence here, it's pathetic. So, you know, and this is, I remember in late 1984, when I was hoping that Ed Beckett then would go ahead with that $4,000 and do it. He didn't do it. I remember one afternoon in the late year, I was just watching the whole width of my backyard of the hillside just run off like a waterfall. And I just put my head down and cried. And that was, as my medical records can show, that was the start of deep depression that still gets me. Because I look at this every day and every night. So it's been a lot of adjustment, but it's not going to continue. It's even killing this little pine tree that I had there because of the excessive water. So it's a continuing situation. Thanks again.
Thanks, John.
So you're going to spearhead whatever happens.
Should I? Yeah, do you have any recommendations, or should I request the administration? Thanks, John. Should I request the administration?
I talked to the administration and see.
I'll have follow-up with the administration.
Finished.
Okay, we're done?
We're done.
Going to move on to community issues. We have several items on our agenda. The first two are proposed ordinances in response to a presentation from several weeks ago. We have proposed ordinances for domestic registry, domestic partner registration,
John, about the sheet.
and what the law director's office has called criminal intimidation, which was proposed as hate crimes bills. So we'll talk quickly about the proposed domestic registry. Service Safety Director Paula Horan, do you want to talk and then I'll fill in, or?
We can go either way.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. The domestic registry would change our City Code Title III to add domestic registry to that. There are some definitions in here. A non-marital relationship of two adults of the same or different sex who share a common residence and affirm that they share responsibility for each other's common welfare and have signed and filed a declaration of domestic partnership within the city. The form will be done by administration. It's very simple. We're going to, model it after other forms where they, and the language is all in here, what they are committing to, stating their relationship of mutual support. They're not in a marriage expressly recognized by a state or in any other domestic partnership or civil union. Both at least adults, not related by blood, mentally competent to enter into this. They currently share a primary residence and anticipate continuing that, and that they will also file a termination of partnership if that occurs. Sign off on it, have it notarized, and we would maintain that at the mayor's office. There is one gap in this, and that is a fee. I've searched United States-wide. It ranges from 0 to 65. We've modeled ours after Cleveland, which is currently $50 filing fee. So.
Okay.
And it's a one-time fee.
Okay. Let me just add quickly that I think the Service Safety Director mentioned that nothing regarding this registry shall be interpreted to change any local, state, federal law, nor shall it be construed as recognizing anything such as a marriage or grant any legal status. This would be what I consider almost a sympathetic, I don't want to say sympathetic, what word am I wanting to use? A symbolic union registry. And so this is adding new language to our body of ordinances, and we will be having this up for first reading of 3 readings next week. Although I'm going to ask for any comments at this time, any changes that you might see that we need to make. The Office of the Mayor and the Service Safety Director has been working very diligently on this, and they've created this. So, Mayor?
So what you're saying, it really has no effect on medical record access or anything else?
That's true.
Okay.
It doesn't affect the law of the state of Ohio, as it were. It does indeed, though. I agree that it's symbolic, but again, it's also open to domestic partners, whether of same sex, opposite sex.
Okay.
Yes. No, it doesn't have any legal bearing at this time. The state or federal could change our outlook on this, but at this time, we're saying this does not give any legal access.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. We'll proceed with this for first reading next Monday. And I think Member Butler is going to talk quickly about what we've labeled the criminal intimidation.
Thank you, Member Sands. And pretty much support what Mr. Sands was addressing this. We acknowledged this a couple weeks ago. So on a quest to improve our language and safety to the community, specifically to hate crimes, we have some suggestions from the Law Director's Office on the definition of intimidation, and there's 4 sections to this. Specifically, I think Section B, no person shall violate 13.02.04 menacing, 13.03.12 criminal damaging or endangering, or 13.03.13 criminal mischief by reason of actual or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, marital or familial status, age or disability as defined by the Ohio Revised Code, Section 3304.11a of another person or group of persons. And again, this is information that we've received and suggestions from the Law Director's Office, who's been looking at similar legislation and similar ordinances in other communities as well. Any comments or suggestions?
I should have recognized the law director on all of this. His office has really worked very closely with us. The law director's office wanted it to be known that we have already prosecuted under the existing intimidation, hate crime, as it were. But this indeed just clarifies, spell out, it adds the additional.
It adds some additional penalties for, as I read this. It makes the crime jump up to a higher level of prosecution and fine or any punishment that might be involved.
And it clearly outlines, as Councilman Butler indicated, it outlines already what we deem our protected classes, as it were. So it identifies each one of those.
Yes. Which we have ordinances which prohibit anything in housing or
discriminatory practices in hiring or
housing, hiring, anything like that. But this is strengthening our criminal prosecution for these crimes. Mm-hmm. Again, questions or comments? We'll proceed for first reading with this ordinance next week. I'm not sure, is Scott Thompson here? Yes, he is. Scott is just back from a informational workshop about something called the Community Access Preservation Act, and he's going to talk to us about it.
I had put in all your boxes. This sheet here talks a little bit. Basically, I'm asking the council to put together a one-reading resolution in support of the CAP Act. It's a congressional bill right now, number 1746. It's a bipartisan bill that corrects some of the things that's been happening in a negative way to PEG access over the last 5 to 7 years. Going back to some changes in the Federal Communication Act, how some of the issues with and how PEG was handled on your cable systems. In Ohio, we have 2007 had a franchising statewide franchising bill put together that took away the local municipalities' rights to negotiate with the cable provider for their own right-of-way, and so that was one of the big things that's happened. Beginning January of 2012, the full impact of the Senate Bill 117 from 2007 goes into effect. We've been kind of skirting under it all along just because we hadn't had a current franchise, so we fell under it immediately in 2007. The rest of the people in Ohio that may have had a franchise in place with Time Warner or Comcast, whoever, January, those contracts are null and void. So everybody is under the state franchise at that point. The big thing with the state franchise to keep aware of, even if the CAP Act does not go through, we still will receive some franchise money through the state, 5%, just like we've been receiving. Where it affects other communities more adversely than what we have is how other PEG stations are set up and operated. There might be, while we're all under city, money comes into the city and it comes through the general fund and through our third-party contract with ACT. Other communities may have like a Nelsonville, Albany, and the Plains all pool their money and have one nonprofit run their cable system. And there's some limits with the state franchise on how you can spend that money. Basically, you can rent the building, but you can't pay for people who run the station. So statewide, there's going to be some communities that are really in a hardship right now in Ohio, and there are also 5 other states in the country that's in a similar situation come January. So the CAP Act, the Alliance for Community Media, is an organization that the city belongs to. That kind of helps PEG centers across the country keep on top of things. So they've been working real hard to work with folks, congressional people, to sponsor this bill. So it's just was introduced last Thursday, and there's 4 things that it addresses. The first one ensures it takes away the limitations on how you can spend your money, which we've talked about. You can use your money for whatever you want to operate your station. The second thing is it's called discriminatory treatment of PEG channels. What's happened is there's been playing with where stations have been on your dial, and while it's everybody. The basic idea is that you should have access to these programs through a really basic tier, and that's not happened in all cable systems across the country. They've got moved to digital tier, where people have to pay the extra $7, $8 a month and subscribe to the digital package to get these programs. So basically, it levels the field back to where it was, where it's basic cable, and that's where things will stay. Preservation of PEG support and localism. Basically, it's just a review committee to review what has happened over these past 5 to 7 years with state franchising, the effects of the Cable Act changes, and to kind of right some wrongs, basically, in a nutshell, is what has happened and how some PEG channels and communities have been hurt by the state franchising. And then the last thing is the definition of cable system, and that's a big one as far as we don't have it here, but if there's AT&T in some communities providing cable service through their UVerse system, which is and AT&T's way of thinking, they're not a cable company. They operate on the telephone line, so therefore they don't have to pay franchising fees. And it defines any protocol, transmission protocol used to get cable TV into your home as a cable operation and is subject to franchise fees. So all in all, having attended the conference call and lecture stuff in Columbus on Friday, this is a really good thing. I mean, we're not going to be out of business come January, but this will secure PEG across the country in a definite way, so it carries on.
Because some cable channels in other states are affected even more than we might be.
Yeah, and when it comes to state franchises, each state put together their own package, and there are some not as good as even what we have, and ours isn't great, but it's not as detrimental, I guess, as some places they're going to be out of business come January if this doesn't happen.
Okay, Scott, will you help us with the with some document that we can pass?
Yeah, we
next
can
week.
put a resolution.
One reading resolution, is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, this is a question that really has to do with the recent increase in the bill from the cable company. I guess I'd like to know, does all of that money come to you, or is part of it going to federal money?
We would only get, right now, 5%. So
Okay.
whatever they're extra and above,
It may be 5%. It's above 116.
so
Middle
we're
of the
supposed to
road
get,
service.
it's a gross revenue calculation.
Okay,
That, as I
5%.
understand, does not include like a Roadrunner type service. This is just your cable costs.
Oh,
So,
okay. But there's no other tax other than local. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Scott. I don't have any miscellaneous. Anybody else? Okay, so, Service Safety Director.
At the risk of causing more ire, just a brief note about noise and the potential changes there, such that the Chief of Police went to Student Senate last week and spoke with Student Senate, and their key issue seems to be and remains the criminal portion of the ordinance as it is now, as opposed to the misdemeanor or the ticket kind of thing, administrative violation that we use for trash. So I believe we're going to continue discussing and see if we can't work towards a better compromise without the change in the timings as was it were. So more later.
Yeah, we appreciate the chief speaking in our place, and we appreciate any help he can give us.
So could you repeat the only issue
The
outstanding?
major issue that they were focused on is the criminal nature of the violation as opposed to an administrative violation, similar to how we do trash tickets now. Those are deemed administrative.
So the people who I told not to come tonight probably weren't so concerned about that, were concerned about the 10 to 12.
Correct.
Right.
So we'd like to continue the discussion with representatives from Student Senate to see what kind of resolution, possible compromise we can bring forward.
And the compromise would require, I guess, that some other parties be involved, like, for example, the aggrieved neighbors and so on. I mean, it's not just the students and the chief. I would think that the neighbors should have some input at that point in time. I mean, because we're getting pressure from them. Let's get right down to brass tacks.
I understand the timing is...
But I mean, compromise, it isn't a compromise, it's a concession, isn't it?
Again, the chief had already spoke to that aspect previously regarding that he tended to agree why a noise violation comes with a criminal attachment as opposed to the litter, as it were, that we're already effectively...
We had 7 in 10 years, is that correct? 7 actual convictions that were... I mean, so they don't always use the criminal thing, they only use it once in a while, isn't that correct?
I know. My understanding is that is, you have violated the law, and then here's, as opposed to you violated the law, here's your ticket, pay your fine.
I thought they always went through municipal
They
court.
do
They usually
go
get
through
court
municipal
charges and 4 hours of community service and a fine.
And it was about 10% maybe that were convicted of, in the past at least. I don't know how the new improved
It's my
one.
understanding that Judge Grimm has upheld the...
800, 900 a year then?
No, I think
No,
the number...
that's a total of noise complaints. I see what you're saying in terms
Well, I
of
mean,
what
I think
actually
it's-
winds
yeah,
up being
okay.
a cited violations.
I just, all of our constituents will be going,
Okay, really, again, the reason why we brought it up is so council gets involved. If council wants to be involved in this conversation, you're going to have to pass the law anyway. You're going to have to deal with it in one way or the other. If you want to be involved in conversation, I guess the thing to do would be to coordinate with the chief and the student senate.
well, I guess that wasn't my point. My point is that a compromise, I mean, we could alter the law on the recommendation of the police chief after we consulted with the citizenry. We could. And I think that some parts of the proposal are pretty slender in their support on this body, at least when I listened to them last time. Notably the 10 o'clock
Exactly.
to 12 o'clock.
Right.
I understand.
The compromise comes through our representation, I believe, and
I think
so...
it's a terrible word. I think we should talk about changing the law and not really
Well-
say, like somehow it makes maybe the participants feel better because they accomplished something, but, we change laws all the time. Tell us what you think should happen.
And I think that, I hope that from these conversations, that if any of us want to attend, I think we're welcome, but again, the chief is representing us, and then we're representing, so the citizens, so nothing is going to happen unless we make it happen, unless we change the law. And so he's coming back to us with some suggestions. Member Butler?
Thank you. I was just going to add similar, again, to echo Member Bain, is that the First Ward members that have expressed concern to me, again, want to see the hours remain the same, not to change them, to not drop it back to midnight, but to keep the quiet hours where they are. Although I am open to the idea or discussion of it not being a criminal offense, but again, upping the fine, I would like to see a larger fine for the offenses or for the behavior. But changing the hours is something that is not interest First Ward members.
I think we're all very strong on that. Yes.
Are people leaving this town with a criminal record that would be found when they look for a job because they hosted a very loud party?
I do not know. I'd have to ask the judge. I don't know if it's something that if you pay your fine, do your time, that it's kind of thing. If there's a sunset period, or then it's no longer that. So.
Yeah, because, if that is their concern, I can certainly understand it, and I'd like to know if that is what happens here.
We'll get back in. Again, this wasn't intended to be on the agenda,
Yeah.
to my knowledge. She just wanted to bring it up to date. And again, you have templates out there. You have the table noise ordinance. You have what we put forth 2 weeks ago. We have the present noise ordinance that is on the books. They're all up for play if you want. It's your call. You can change the law, as Nancy says.
Right. Yes.
Oh, I was just going to comment that
Go ahead.
Mr. Safranik's here. I didn't know if you wanted to
Okay.
make a comment.
It's a committee meeting.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
Phil Safranik, 34 Grove Street. I just want to remark that, I've survived for a number of years with my conviction for allowing a dog to run at large. I think the students could survive these noise ordinance convictions. My thought.
Okay.
And there's always expungement.
Oh, from a lawyer's office. Okay. We're done. Transportation Committee.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 agenda items specified out. The first one is discussion of a dump truck. Earlier this year, we had talked about a larger, more expensive salt truck, and there was some concern, given the budgetary situation with the city, whether or not this would be a wise time to pursue it. And Director of Public Works, Andy Stone, has investigated the possibility of buying a smaller truck. Rather than a 2-ton truck, it would be a 1-ton truck. And so it would have the advantage of being less money than the 2-ton. It would also could be used year-round, so in a sense even more versatile than what we were talking about earlier. They could have a tank fitted on it for a heated bed, and that would allow us to do street repairs earlier in the spring. We could go to Columbus with the heated truck, get a load of asphalt, and do the very kind of repairs that have been happening, this past week on Richland Avenue. We could be doing them earlier in the year.
State Street.
And State Street.
Okay.
And so then the other option is that we could also attach a salt spreader to this truck, as I understand from the design. The cost would be approximately $85,000 for the truck and $15,000, my understanding, $85,000 total, which includes the $15,000 for the warmer within that $85,000 total.
How much was the other one?
Oh, how much was the other truck, the 2-ton truck?
2-ton, 115, I think. Remember,
Yeah, it was $115,000, I think.
a little bit more, I think. It
Maybe.
was somewhere around 115.
Okay. So this would have 115 compared to what we're talking about now, 70,000. And then the added for the heater element on it.
May I add something, Chris?
Pardon me? Yeah, sure.
Part of the reason for the heated bed is that many of the asphalt plants started late. The nearest one is Haydenville, I guess, up the road a little bit. What you're seeing, of course, to take it anywhere further, it depends on, at this point, it depends on the economy when the asphalt plants start and what kind of projects are going. And that's why we're a little bit delayed in terms of repairing the roads. In one sense, it's probably a limited time that we can use it. On the other sense, we could actually extend it both ends in the fall and the spring. I think in conversation with Andy pointed out that the auction coming up will be eliminating quite a few of the vehicles. Some of this impounded ones, but other vehicles in terms of the other trucks too. So.
Right, we have 8 vehicles and the speed monitor that will be coming up for auction. Any other questions or comments about the truck? Okay. Next item is the Boogie on the Bricks.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, Member Nisley. I just wanted, again, to bring it to the attention of the community as well as the mayor's office about an ordinance for closing the street off for Boogie on the Bricks. It's become an annual event over the course of the summer, coinciding with Ohio Brew Week. Again, these are wildly popular events and help bring people to our community in the summertime and family-oriented. Just a couple sections of this that we acknowledge the need to close the street off to vehicular traffic, specifically Washington and State Streets. And there's a ban on parking in that vicinity as well. And then a temporary suspension of the unnecessary noise, the noise ordinance suspension for the bandstand. And then lastly, we will likely suspend in the past we've suspended the metered parking in the garage. And I'm hoping that we will do that again as well. I do believe we also have some members of the community here that might want to speak on behalf of that as well. I don't know if Mr. Wasserman wanted to say anything, or if there's any concerns as well from... Sure. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rick Wasserman. I guess I'm the founder of the festival. I guess I was the first coordinator for the first 5 years, and this is Will Drury, who came to our community about a year ago, and he's been hired to be the coordinator ongoing, and also was the chairman of the board for the last year or two. We're going to stage the 7th annual Boogie on the Bricks. It's going to take place on the 16th of July. We hope that it'll take place on Court Street between Union Street and State Street, which is 2 blocks. Last year was the first year that we utilized 2 blocks instead of 1 block. We do, or have, in the recent past, partnered with Ohio Brew Week so that they can have a presence at the festival. This is, I think, the 6th Brew Week this year, and for the last, I think, 5 of them, we've done a little partnership where they could have a space on the street and have some of the brews and the brewers that they bring to town have a featured space so that the community could take part in both festivals at once. Brew Week realized pretty early in their game that linking the 2 festivals together was a good idea for the community. Lets us co-market them, lets the County Convention and Visitors Bureau market them together, bring people down. It increases hotel room stays and increases overall spending for the events. And we have ongoing discussions about how we're going to work it out exactly with Brew Week, but basically we think it's going to be the same as it was last year. The parking garage is an important component. Giving people a free place to park is a great way to encourage folks who don't ordinarily come uptown to come uptown. Let's remember that the original purpose of this festival was to do exactly that, was to bring folks who don't ordinarily come uptown to the uptown area for a day of fun in the sun, so they can see what stores are up there, what goes on up there, and hopefully come back, sometime before the next Boogie on Bricks. Anything else you want to say, or you guys have any questions?
It's definitely a not student-focused event. This is something for the families. It's held at a time of the year that is, when the student population is probably at its lowest. We have a kid zone that is alcohol-free and run by the Athens Children's Center, and everything is geared towards bringing a family and for local residents. Not a situation like 8 Fest. We are a festival, but we don't like to get thrown into the same basket as that.
Thank you. Thanks. Any other questions or comments?
I have one. It's legislative if we start this reading through and we don't have a third meeting this month, it would indeed need the emergency clause or what have you that goes into effect less than 30 days, because I'm looking at the next regular sessions being the 16th and the 6th of June and the 20th of June. And this event is July 16th, so.
So do I need to request an emergency clause then, or do we?
Just add it to your ordinance.
Okay.
The clerk will do that.
Yes, she's kind that way.
Get it done, David.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. That is all that I have.
Any other miscellaneous items for transportation? Okay, thank you.
Although maybe a reminder that we have a meeting this month for pedestrian,
We have the bicycle pedestrian plan meets on the 16th at 1 p.m. And that's a volunteer group that helped move the bicycle and pedestrian plan together. This time we're going to be taking a look at the city comprehensive plan and the bike plan and seeing about next steps for implementation. So anybody that would be interested in joining us in the conversation and discussion, we invite you to attend. It'll be at the City Hall conference room. Thanks, Ken.
Last of all, finance, did you have something else? Finance, did you have something else? I'm sorry. Finance and Personnel Committee says miscellaneous. I don't have any miscellaneous. However, the woman we were just speaking, only $12 million.
It'll be 8:30, and I'll still get home in time. I wanted to ask if everyone is in agreement that we would raise the base fee for generic drugs to $10 from $5, as we talked before. I also did send that letter to the new personnel person to try and reduce our costs in drug coverage, because about a fourth of our self-insurance is going to drugs, and right now we are paying retail for drug amounts. And one of those combines, and I gave her both references, and I trust she'll be back to us soon on that one. And that's the end of mine.
I have a comment.
Two hands up.
She indeed has reviewed that. She is working on looking into the suggestions there and some other opportunities for cost savings with prescription plans. The request was actually to not increase the generic because it becomes a disincentive to get generic. And as indicated, there are many generics that you can get for $4 for your 30-day supply now. So that's my comment.
But the university and the county both have 10. Well, I guess we'd have to, I think that's an opinion. I'd like to know if it really does disincentivize. I don't know.
Mayor, you had a comment?
Nothing on this. Oh, the miscellaneous.
Oh, yes.
Some more
And
miscellaneous?
is she also looking into, I guess one of the things that I found kind of astonishing was that we had a contract that was paying out $500,000 that hadn't been approved by council. The costs with Caremark. And so I guess whenever she decides what she wants done, she probably needs to send it through council, so just as we would. It just makes a little bit of sense to do it that way. Probably if somebody had been paying attention to the retail component, we could have saved a little money before this too.
Well, I hope you'll be pleasantly surprised. She does plan on doing research and bringing some proposals for it. So.
I will be pleasantly surprised, Betty.
Good.
I'm sure.
Mayor.
One thing we have is, of course, we're going to be shifting personnel around in the police department, of course, because the captain's now chief. We're going to have captain testing, and we're going to have, of course, have retirement of one lieutenant, loss of one lieutenant on staffing, and we're considering we might get another retirement coming up ahead. There is a COPS Fast grant that's up for application. The deadline is May 25th. I've been in conversation with Claudia, the personnel director, as well as the chief, and see if we could actually put an application if so approved by council. Last time we did this was 02409. This was when we were trying to get some stimulus money at the time. We'd like to try to do an application for two positions. One anticipating the shuffle that would occur, the other one anticipating early retirement, because we have several on the force who are due for retirement. If you remember, the COPS Fast program is a 3-year funding of an entry-level police officer, and then we are committed to 2 years afterwards. Again, there's a full anticipation that we'll need at least 2 in the next few years.
We actually may have a patrol officer leaving us sometime this summer, so we will indeed have vacancies.
So we'll go for the sure thing, the 2. We could try for more. Again, as a grant, we tried for it last time. We did not get it in 2009, but it'd be worth shooting for.
Member Bain, did you?
So the number, the FT is, I think, 21 or something like that, right?
Right now?
21 officers?
I think
Well, let's say hypothetically it's 21, because we have
Okay.
reduced it a few times. So that would mean if we get 2, we'd have to go up to 23. We couldn't just back out the...
That's not correct. What we're doing is anticipating applying for these in anticipation of these vacancies that we're anticipating. A patrol officer leaving us this summer, and the result, and a retirement that we also know that's occurring.
Wouldn't it be a stronger case if you said we wanted to enhance community policing?
We're trying to be
I mean, you could drop them out
accurate,
later
not-
on. What?
We're trying to be accurate in the description.
Well,
of
I
what's
know,
going
but
on.
we've laid off 2. I mean, that's the problem.
Well, we laid off
We're going to
1.
restore it.
I'm sorry,
Well-
we have not laid off any.
Well, no, I'm sorry, wrong
didn't
word.
fill one.
Wrong word, I've been
Okay.
using too many words tonight. We axed the positions.
Yes, we
That were
de-staffed.
vacant.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you want to go for 3? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm afraid that if we get them, they all went to Columbus, as I recall, last time. They got a big bundle of them. But it was pretty, I mean, it was a really effective program for increasing our police on the street where we need them with the assaults and the rest going on. And maybe by the end of that biennium, the second-year budget, maybe we'll have the monies. I mean, I'm thinking back to when it was 6% every year was what the increase was. Now we're at, if we're lucky, 2 or 3%, so.
Okay.
Community policing.
We're just looking at replacements. If you want to have us apply for more, that's a discussion we can have with the chief.
So
No, I agree. We're aware of the fact that the force could be
restored to its former amount.
or enhanced by any means possible. And this, again, I know you were always concerned about the next 2 years after that first 3, the commitment of having to hire.
And it worked last time. I don't think it's the same time.
Well,
I mean, we didn't feel it, did we? You recall, I mean, we just sort of, they moved into the force, and it wasn't until we had a vacancy that we...
So will you anticipate bringing forward a grant proposal
Yeah.
the
next
deadline
week?
is the 25th, so we need authorization from council to do this. If I need it, what?
May.
This
May
month?
25th. It's
It
coming up
opened
for
May
me.
2nd, and it closes May 25th, so that's why you're hearing about it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
It's a pretty quick.
we'll talk about it next week,
So we're going to have a reading of it next week? Right.
I guess.
That's what we're requesting. And since you mentioned community police, the community police dialogue has been scheduled for May 25th, which would be our next committee meeting at 6 p.m. in the front conference room. So if anybody would like to attend, and we'll come up here for council committee.
Thank you all. We're done.
We're adjourned.